So in the last lecture we added some CSS styling to our theme, and then we called get sidebar in order to create an area where users can add some widgets. So get sidebar will load a file, sidebar.php. So now we need to create a sidebar, and then inside sidebar.php we'll call a function that will load the widgets in this sidebar. A sidebar in WordPress, despite its name, it could be not just a sidebar. Sidebar refers to an area where users can put widgets. It doesn't have to be an actual sidebar. So the first thing we need to define a sidebar to place it in our theme. So let's go to lib and create a new file and call it sidebars. In this file we'll define any sidebars we will place in our themes. So sidebars.php. Let's open a PHP tag and let's create a new function. So function and then our prefix, theme name, and let's call it sidebar widgets, and then we'll hook this function to an action called widgets init. So when widgets initialize, we need to run this function. So inside this function we'll put our code to register a sidebar. So simply call a WordPress function called register sidebar. And it takes an array of arguments. So the first argument is an ID, and this should be a unique ID for this specific sidebar. So this is our main sidebar, right, in the blog posts page. So let's call it primary sidebar. And the second argument is a name. Let's also call it a primary sidebar, but make sure you escape any strings as we mentioned before. So primary sidebar, and this name will appear in the admin area as we will see in a moment. And of course our text domain is the theme name placeholder, and then we have a description which will also appear in the admin area, and it should also be escaped. So let's type any description. This sidebar appears in the blog posts page, and the text domain, theme name, and then we have a before widget argument, and this will be any HTML you would like to print before the widget. So in our case we would like to wrap our widget in a section tag, and that's also an HTML5 tag, and I think it's appropriate to use for a widget. And this takes an ID, and it also takes the ID as a placeholder, and WordPress will replace this placeholder by a unique ID that it will generate, and we'll see this also in a moment. You can also give it a class. So I have a CSS class called sidebar widget, and also let's give it a margin bottom of 20, and also it takes a placeholder. So the second placeholder, this is not the second one, and also WordPress will replace this by a unique class that it will generate for each widget. So it's important to put these placeholders here if you will define a custom before widget HTML. So next we have after widget, and here we just close the section. We also have before title. So each widget will have a title, and before title we'll just add some HTML before the title. So we would like maybe to add an h5 tag to wrap the widget in. and after title we will just close the h5 tag. So I think that's it. Let's now include this file in functions.php. So let's duplicate this line and then change it to sidebars. Let's now go to the WP admin page. So I have mine now opened, and then in appearance you will now have a widgets option. You will not have this option if you don't have any sidebars defined. So if you comment out this line and then we don't have it. So now that we have sidebars defined, we can now add widgets. So go to the widget page, and now we have our sidebar where we can drag and drop widgets. So let's add some. So just add a couple of them and add some titles. And now we have to, of course here we still have nothing. We now need to load the sidebar in the sidebar.php file. So how to do that? It's very simple. In sidebar.php, let's now remove this and create a side tag with a role of complementary. And this also is an HTML5 tag where you can use when you have some site content in your website, like in our case a sidebar, as opposed to the main tag that we used in the last section. So let's open a PHP tag, and what we have to do is call a function called dynamic sidebar, and as an argument the ID of the sidebar that we need to load. So in our case we call this primary sidebar, and that's really it. We now have some widgets here. Just have a problem now. Imagine we have a sidebar but we don't have any widgets in it. So let's remove these and then refresh. So we'll have an empty space here. So one solution to this is you can call a function called isActiveSidebar, and this will check if a sidebar has any widgets or not. So it takes also the ID of the sidebar to check, and let's put this in an if condition, and then open curly brackets, and then else, and then close the if condition. And inside the else we can add some text, like you can add widgets here. So this is fine, however it's not a best practice. And actually, according to the latest theme forest requirements for a theme, you shouldn't display text like that in your theme. If the user did not add any widgets, you should try to adapt the design in order to fill that space. So let's do that. Let's instead of displaying the text here, let's delete this and let's copy this if condition and remove it from here. And inside sidebar, let's add this if condition here. So if the sidebar is active, add this row, else don't add anything. So this goes the if condition, and then we will need to, let's copy this also, to if a sidebar is not active, instead of the 8 span here, make it 12. Let the content take over all the available space. So we can open a PHP tag inside, instead of the 8 here, open a PHP tag and then do a ternary expression here. So is sidebar active, make it 8, otherwise 12. So as you can see now, it's filling all the content. It's filling all the space available. And if we added some widgets here, looks like we've done something wrong here. Oh, I think we need to echo this. And that's it. Remove. And refresh. And it's filling all the content. So I think that's it for our sidebar. In the next section, let's add some other sidebars in the footer. We'll create a footer and then we'll let the user add the sidebars. But this time we'll try to do it dynamically, so the user can choose how many sidebars they need in the footer. And according to his input, we will generate different numbers of sidebars. I just forgot to mention something. Let's add some widgets here. And refresh the page. Remember when I told you about the unique ID that WordPress will give? I just want to show you that. So I have here recent posts and number 3, and then a class widget recent entries. So these are what got replaced with in sidebars. They replaced these placeholders. So it's important to put these placeholders.